March 28, Wednesday, clear, cold. The weather has recently become very warm, and flowers of all kinds are blooming as if they are competing with each other. I feel a natural uplift in my heart as the weather is somehow becoming like spring. Ah, the joyous spring has arrived. If I were in my home country now, I would be with a few friends, enjoying the cherry blossoms, gazing at the moon.
What you just heard was an excerpt from a diary entry written by a teenaged Masuo Yasui, March 28, 1906. He had only just arrived to the United States 3 years prior. How do we have access to young Masuo's diary? We owe this access to the Oregon Historical Society, which houses the Yasui Business and Family Papers, and the Library Services and Technology Act, known as LSTA, which provided a grant to help the Oregon Historical Society translate and digitize these papers for all to access. For full citations of the materials shown on screen, please see the description of the video.
I'm Shawna Gandy. I'm the library director at the Oregon Historical Society.
I'm Dana Miller, and I am the Deputy Library Director for Collections, and I manage the team that handles acquisitions and collections care.
My name is Matt Deschaine. I am the Digital Collections Manager, and I manage the digitization programs and digital preservation at OHS.
The Yasui project is sort of it's a multi-year and multi-grant project. The first iteration of it, we actually wrote the grant in late 2021. The state library put out a call for proposals for LSTA grants, and we had been developing one, and so we realized that the Yasui papers was an excellent fit. It is something that had been on Shawna's list to work on for years. I believe it came to OHS in 1991. From Homer Yasui.
Homer is one of Masuo Yasui's youngest sons.
So what was that process like?
Homer and the family had this, incredible trove of materials that had been preserved and put in a barn on their family property. And he was in conversation with a couple of different repositories in Oregon, and OHS was willing to come and pick up the collection and was very excited about it. And so that's how it landed at OHS.
It was actually initially a collection of 200 record carton boxes, so like the ones with the handles, of business records of the Yasui Brothers Company, which mostly was a store that was really well known. It had a couple of locations in Hood River from about 1908 until 1941. And there was actually quite a Japanese population there at the time. And the Yasui brothers, Masuo Yasui was one of the brothers, and he was a kind of a leading figure in the Japanese community there, not just because they had the stores, but because he helped other immigrants navigate like government documents. He could speak English, and he helped people who had just arrived find places to live, find employment.
And the family papers, fast forward 30 years, we reconnected with the Yasuis as part of connecting with a number of members of the community. And so as part of that outreach, we were able to reach Homer, who had all along, he trained as a surgeon, worked as a surgeon, but was a historian at heart. And so he had done all of this research on his own, and they had safeguarded these precious family things. And so I think they were so excited that we were working on the business papers and really felt like that they had trusted us in 1991 and still held that trust. And our relationship with them has grown closer and closer over the years.
Shawna had actually tried to have them reviewed by a couple of Japanese translator volunteers in the 90s. And what we discovered through those volunteers was this is not just modern Japanese, it was pre-World War II Japanese, which has different characters and is different enough from modern Japanese that current speakers and readers of modern cannot read it. So for the first project, we got in contact with some fellows over at the Japanese American Museum of Oregon. So just kind of using the existing network. And wonderfully, they were able to introduce us to some translators who are local to Portland who can read the pre-World War II Japanese and had done some of that work for the Japanese Museum already. So that was really instrumental to even starting the project. And we used LSTA funds to have those translators review the materials so that we at least had a general sense, because there were so many, thousands and thousands of these business documents, mostly business documents in the first collection, to help us sort things and like name the folders and everything so we could provide our typical level of access to the business records. I don't know if I would have felt like we could have really done it without all of the extra time we put into it because we had this grant going. But it's otherwise, the story is relatively undertold in the way that we tell U.S. history. A lot of people don't know, a lot of people don't learn about, for example, the presence of Japanese Americans in the early 20th century, and then what happened during incarceration in World War II. They don't know that most of the people that were incarcerated were children and elderly people either. A lot of folks, who couldn't have had a whole lot to do with spying or whatever were sent to the camps. It's just not something a lot of people know. And that's exactly what is, I think, so incredibly valuable. But also you have this family who's been fighting for this to be known the whole time. It was something that even the victims of the incarceration didn't talk about until recently. And yet the Yasui family was willing to always talk about their story so that people knew. And I think it had something to do with their tenacity that we were like, well, we can figure out how to make this otherwise difficult collection available to people. And we all really piled in to do the most that we could, even though, like, for your part, it was hard. You had to build things. For my part, it was so many pieces of paper. It was a little bit overwhelming in handwriting, and we can't read it all. So,
this is almost 50 years of materials. It's like it follows Masuo, the family patriarch, from when he arrived in Seattle in 1903.
He was like 16 or something.
Yeah. And, he came and he worked on the railroads, which was a common thing. And then he, ended up in Portland, and then eventually in Hood River over the course of the next 5 years or so. And I think, it's interesting to see his perspective, to see his diaries. We translated a number of entries from his immigration diary. This is very important documentation, right, of that process of entering the country and the experience of the time. Following from that, you have, anti-Asian exclusion of land ownership, in California first, and then Washington, and then Oregon eventually. So you think of all of these like trials and tribulations, and things that they went through. And I think the collection really exposes the level of community that comes from that sort of tight knit the community becomes when you're going through that shared experience. And I think you also see the allies, right? You see the other members of the community who come together, to support them. And then you have World War II, right? So you have Min Yasui, who was Homer's elder brother, who was arrested for violating curfew laws in Portland after the executive order, and spent how long in Multnomah County Jail in solitary confinement.
Right.
They have at the Japanese American Museum of Oregon, they have his cell as on display, which you can go and see.
So Min Yasui was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Obama posthumously. And he really continues to be a symbol of democracy and freedom and citizenship. And that is really central to the story of the Yasuis and to the activism that they continue to engage in, and that we embrace through our Yasui exhibit that we're developing to debut in June as a flagship exhibit for our Oregon 250 celebration. I think it's a unique situation too, because their story was known. So their story is the subject of Stubborn Twig, which is a book by Lauren Kessler that won the Oregon Book Award, I believe, in 1993. But so it was so people had read it. I'd read it, but in general, people do not understand this history. But also because, there's a book written about the family, it's a compelling story, but we knew we had 200 cartons of business records, and there was a lot more to the story. And what we uncovered was really the story of a community. And there may be things in that collection which in other collections might not be very interesting, like a check stub, or a receipt that have a record of someone who's not recorded anywhere else.
Right.
So it's really important. I knew it was important because way back in the 90s, Homer had come through with our library director and some researchers from Yokohama who were Japan, who were developing an immigration museum, were traveling all over the United States doing research, and they told me that they had never seen a collection as complete as the business records. So, we had on our radar, we knew that it was something we just had to figure out. And without the LSTA's support, I don't think we ever would have. And it's just led from one thing to the next. So it's been really wonderful.
So as you're putting together your proposal for the grant, as you're looking at tackling this project, what was some of your project planning like going into that? Like, how did you prepare to take this on?
One of the things that it was so hard in the planning is that there is absolutely no way you could take even that many materials for like 40 some odd boxes of just those business correspondence would still more than fill this room if you pull them all. You couldn't possibly translate all of it. And so we had to find ways to create access or understanding of what these materials are without going all the way in the weeds. So that was part of it. And then having the people who did that review, the translators, help us select a handful for the first grant, a handful of highlights that would help sort of reflect, okay, these are the type of materials that are in this business records collection, which is part of what Matt's team really ended up showing off in, I think, dazzling effect.
A lot of it was really just getting to know the translators, who were fantastic. The Yoko Gold was the leader. Naomi Diffley and Mami Kikuchi the other of the main translators. There were some other volunteers in Sapporo, Japan that they had known who we didn't work with directly, but they were pretty instrumental in getting those translations done as well. So a lot of my work involved sort of getting to know them, getting to know how they preferred to work, and sort of meshing that with how my team works when we digitize really any other collection materials, excuse me. Digitization is sort of the process of turning an analog, say a sheet of paper, or a photograph, a negative, or even an audio recording or a moving picture film, and sort of translating the data or the essence of that thing is digital form, so that you can access it online, or on your computer, whatever device you're using. So there's a lot of benefits to doing that. On the collection side of things, some materials are fragile. They might be too large or unwieldy. They might be at risk for damage if they're handled too much. So, digitization will help to sort of alleviate the stresses on those. From an access point of view, it allows people all over the state, all over the country, all over the world, really, to access these things, any materials, and that's something that opens up way more opportunities for us to fulfill our mission. One of the unique things that we did in this project is we created metadata in English and Japanese, which is something we'd never done before. No one on our team speaks Japanese, so we were again leaning very heavily on their expertise and their understanding of the materials. So now you can go on and you can see the original, you can see the English translation, and you can see a modern Japanese translation as well. The other thing too is to build a structure that's flexible enough, right, that we could use this for any language if we wanted to. All we need is the right translators and to do a little teaching, and that value is huge. In the future, if we want to do a different collection in a different language as well.
So that piece of it really sets you up for success for future projects as they come.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's of use as well because he's also been able to go to a couple of archives conferences and share his process and workflows with other organizations that may also have their own foreign language historic collections that they would like to make accessible also. So, but that access to those items, understanding what we have, some of the things that were translated and that you put up online, the family's never seen. So not only do we have researchers from all over the country now able to see, and they are in fact looking at it, there are some really special things online. And maybe you could talk about the education use that's already happening with some of these materials.
Right. So actually, during the first of our 2 consecutive grant projects, part of the plan was to do a public program in Mount Hood with our partners, Japanese American Museum of Oregon and the History Museum of Hood River County. And we did that in April of that year. And our education team was so excited about these materials that they partnered with the Japanese American Museum of Oregon and developed a teacher workshop and delivered that the same day, right before the program, and then had the teachers attend the program. And it was a packed house, very well received. And our education team has continued to deliver that workshop multiple times and has developed all kinds of curriculum materials based on the project. So it was a big bonus.
Yeah, we got direct access to everything that Matt's team has worked on. And it's now available for K-12, but also anybody else. And that's like a huge service considering anybody can look at the website and go under digital collections and find this stuff.
So with that, then this is changing the way our children are taught our history.
Yes.
Wow.
That is the end goal, or that is the end game, I think, of this project.
And for our education team, this was perfectly timed because they were developing curriculum to meet the state's ethnic studies requirements. So it was, gave them really good material to work with.
And I would say we wanted to do both the kind of large scale review of the Japanese materials in the first grant, and then also make sure some selected items were translated, and then do the larger translation of the more family papers, diaries, letters and stuff. We wanted to make sure that we caught that access while we could, right? So created that access while we had the opportunity and the appropriate network in place to do it. So it was kind of about, this is the time. And we had other things, that were in our queue. I had a couple other projects we were trying to get started too, but it was kind of like once we were on the train, we had to write it to the end, and I think the end is Matt and his team partnering with Densho to do this mass digitization that was literally everything that Homer Yasui ever wanted. And he passed, actually, right around, was it 2 years ago, a year ago, year and a half ago. But we were able to say that we were well on our way to doing this. We were able to say we're going to do the thing that we promised, not just to make an effort, but that we're actually going to be able to do it. So
That's amazing.
He's spent decades of his life researching and advocating and giving lectures all over the Western United States, visiting the sites of the various incarceration sites, memory sites, and just to witness everything that the family has put into this. Every single member of this family is amazing. And he was the last of his siblings alive at the time. And he had been the memory keeper. This man spent so much of his life making sure this wasn't forgotten. And we picked it up and we ran as archives don't work fast, but we ran as hard and as fast with it as we could. And we were able to deliver on this promise.
It really, ultimately, we want this story to be better known, and making it available for scholarship, for educational use. Having some of the content online will, help encourage that as well. So it will live on because it is a collection that we will keep forever. And these materials are online with robust digital preservation backing them, so they'll be up also forever.
Yeah. I think really that's just kind of what I was going to say is, you do this work so that people can find access and use the materials. And so we know that they're already in Oregon classrooms, people are learning, students are learning, but teachers are also learning and then learning how to use those primary source materials that we have made available in their lessons. So there's like multi-level access happening. And then you've got, historians and college students and all kinds of researchers, and everybody they can find things. So we're already starting to see different kinds of folks accessing these materials and researching them. So that's kind of living the dream. That's kind of what we're there for.
I think for me, it's going to sound corny, but if we go back to our mission, right? And the big crux of it for me is to inspire curiosity about the people, places, and events that shape our state's history, right? So I think for me, that's my hope, is that people can go, they can read, and it'll inspire them to understand the past, and make a better future.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've laid the foundation for serving the public for a long time. And I think the thing that's the most valuable to me is the trust that we have been able to develop in working with the community, with our partners, and with the state, in demonstrating that we really are serious about our mission, to bring the history to statewide, and having the tools to do that and being able to implement them in such an elegant way, to bring a powerful story it's very meaningful. It's one of the best things in my whole career. So
Traditionally, people have needed to travel to institutions to look at physical paper records. Now, through digitization, those materials can be accessed from anywhere by anyone with internet access. People are now able to research and learn about the past at their own rhythm. These materials offer a unique perspective on historical events, often bringing people in close contact with particularly personal documents, such as Masuo Yasui's diary entries.